The air hung heavy in the office, saturated with tension and the scent of polished wood. Jessica Stark sat across from Ethan Caldwell, her heart racing. The confidential dossier on his desk loomed over her like a dark cloud. "How long have you been with us, Jessica?" he asked, his calm demeanor a deceptive mask. The clock ticked loudly, each second amplifying her anxiety. Was this really how her 29-year journey was ending? Betrayal washed over her like cold water, leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. With her dignity hanging by a thread, what was she supposed to do now? Jessica was 61 years old, and just minutes before this meeting, she was a lead regulatory advisor at one of Philadelphia's largest manufacturing companies. For nearly 3 decades, she ensured Virtue Dynamics adhered to legal standards, documenting irregularities while others opted for easy fixes. Now, her retirement fund was just 3 days away from fully vesting, a milestone she had worked tirelessly to achieve. Ethan slid the folder toward her. "Due to financial cuts, we're letting you go," he stated, his eyes cold and unyielding. "Effective immediately." The office space tilted slightly. Financial cuts? Virtue Dynamics had just announced record profits last quarter. "This is your severance package," he continued, tapping the folder with his manicured finger. "Sign by tomorrow, or get nothing. HR will escort you to clean out your desk." Fear flooded her mind. Anger, shock, and the instinct to plead bubbled up, but a strange calm enveloped her instead. This wasn't random. It felt premeditated, a strategic move to cut her loose just as her retirement fund was within reach. "Thank you for the opportunity," Jessica said quietly, picking up the folder without breaking her composure. She didn't even glance at the contents. Ethan looked taken aback, expecting tears or a desperate plea. But she'd spent her life analyzing patterns, and this one was as clear as day. She stood tall, smoothed her skirt, and walked out with her dignity intact. Janet from HR hovered awkwardly as Jessica packed her personal items. The photo of her late husband, Thomas, the potted plant her daughter had given her on leaving for college, the plaque for 25 years of service, proud reminders of a life spent dedicated to her career. But she didn't take them. In that moment, she realized her worth wasn't defined by any of those objects or a corporate title. She was Jessica Stark. Resilient. Ready for a new path. The world outside blurred into a haze, the rhythmic tapping of the April rain against my windshield echoing the storm brewing inside me. I felt lost, shattered. Just minutes ago, I was an experienced compliance officer at Virtue Dynamics, confident in my dedication and hard work. Now, I was sitting in my car, clutching a cardboard box filled with memories I didn't even want to look at. How could this be happening? As I drove through familiar streets, past the cathedral where I said, "I do," to my late husband Thomas, the scent of rain filled the air, mingling with lingering regret. I glanced into the rearview mirror, just in time to notice a flash of headlights approaching. My heart raced. Ethan Caldwell, my former boss. Standing at the curb, his expression unreadable, like he was hiding secrets of his own. In that moment, everything shifted. The weight of his betrayal wasn't mine alone to bear. His shadow cast doubts on others, revealing how deep this web of deceit might run. Had it all been a setup, executed like a surgical strike aimed at my career, my dignity? I thought of the years I invested in this job, the late nights and sacrifices. I had meticulously documented financial irregularities for years, but every warning fell on deaf ears. They silenced me, ignored the signs, all my efforts dismissed. And now, faced with this betrayal, something ignited within me, an urgent need for truth. As the rain intensified, pooling on the empty street, I realized this wasn't just about losing my job, it was about reclaiming my story. I parked in my modest driveway, taking a deep breath as I let the gravity of the past few hours settle over me. What would I do next? I refused to let my experience be a footnote in someone else's agenda. I was Jessica Stark, resilient, calm, experienced. I could turn this around. Could I uncover the conspiracy hidden beneath layers of corporate deceit? The echoes of April rain whispered that the answer was yes. I just needed to find a way forward. The world outside blurred into a haze, the rhythmic tapping of the April rain against my windshield echoing the storm brewing inside me. I felt lost, shattered. Just minutes ago, I was an experienced compliance officer at Virtue Dynamics, confident in my dedication and hard work. Now I was sitting in my car, clutching a cardboard box filled with memories I didn't even want to look at. How could this be happening? As I drove through familiar streets, past the cathedral where I said, "I do," to my late husband Thomas, the scent of rain filled the air, mingling with lingering regret. I glanced into the rearview mirror just in time to notice a flash of headlights approaching. My heart raced. Ethan Caldwell, my former boss. Standing at the curb, his expression unreadable, like he was hiding secrets of his own. In that moment, everything shifted. The weight of his betrayal wasn't mine alone to bear. His shadow cast doubts on others, revealing how deep this web of deceit might run. Had it all been a setup, executed like a surgical strike aimed at my career, my dignity? I thought of the years I invested in this job, the late nights and sacrifices. I had meticulously documented financial irregularities for years, but every warning fell on deaf ears. They silenced me, ignored the signs, all my efforts dismissed. And now, faced with this betrayal, something ignited within me, an urgent need for truth. As the rain intensified, pooling on the empty street, I realized this wasn't just about losing my job, it was about reclaiming my story. I parked in my modest driveway, taking a deep breath as I let the gravity of the past few hours settle over me. What would I do next? I refused to let my experience be a footnote in someone else's agenda. I was Jessica Stark, resilient, calm, experienced. I could turn this around. Could I uncover the conspiracy hidden beneath layers of corporate deceit? The echoes of April rain whispered that the answer was yes. I just needed to find a way forward. Inside, I made myself tea and sat at my kitchen table, finally opening the severance package. The terms were insulting. 3 months' salary in exchange for waiving all rights to future claims against the company. No retirement fund, no healthcare continuation, just a check and a legal trap designed to silence me. The document required my signature by 5 p.m. tomorrow. They were counting on fear and desperation to make me sign quickly, without consulting anyone. This wasn't standard practice, it was a targeted effort to rob me of what I'd earned. I set the papers aside and walked to my home office where I kept my records. Behind a row of family photo albums sat a fireproof lockbox, my insurance policy. For 4 years, I'd been bringing home copies of troubling financial documents, keeping detailed notes, saving emails that outlined misconduct. Not because I planned to use them, but because my instincts sensed something was off. I opened the box, reviewing its contents. Loan applications with falsified data, manipulated quarterly reports, emails instructing staff to backdate certifications. It was all there, over 1,000 pages revealing the systematic fraud that had flourished under Ethan's direction. I had reported every issue through proper channels, only to be ignored. My pulse quickened as I reached for my phone. What would be the next step? Would I expose them, or let them bury my truth? The clock was ticking, and I had a decision to make. Scrolling through my contacts, I stumbled upon a name I hadn't thought of in years. Gregory Santos. He used to be Grant Wells' CFO before moving on to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Memories of his unwavering support washed over me like the scent of rain on dry pavement. My heart raced as I hovered over his name. Could he be the answer I desperately needed? The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose after a nearly 2-hour conversation with Gregory. I slipped into the Navy suit I reserved for crucial meetings, feeling like I was gearing up for battle. "This isn't just about wrongful termination, Jessica," his voice echoed in my mind. "What you're describing points to serious securities violations." He didn't mince words. The moment I told him about my retirement fund and the secrets I had uncovered, it felt like a light switch flipped on inside me. The stakes were higher than I'd imagined. My fight had implications beyond personal grief. It could shine a light on corporate dishonesty. Gregory laid out the whistleblower protections available to me. "Don't sign anything. Secure your documents somewhere safe," he warned. Fueled by adrenaline, I spent Saturday morning meticulously organizing all that I had collected: copies of misleading financial reports, emails hinting at state secrets, and fabricated loan applications. Each page felt like evidence of their betrayal, and I could hear the rustle of the papers echoing the tensions that hung in the air. By noon, I had 3 identical packages ready: one for the SEC, one for my files, and one that would serve as leverage if the walls started to close in. My phone rang relentlessly. I saw different names flashing on my screen: Janet from HR, Ethan Caldwell, even the company's legal counsel. Each voicemail played out like a frenzied drum roll, their urgency wrapping around me. "Jessica, we need that paperwork signed today. I can come by and pick it up if—" They thought fear could bend my resolve, but they were wrong. My future hung in the balance, but now I was ready to reclaim my narrative. I was no longer just a victim. I was an agent of change. As I prepared to stand my ground, I felt a fierce determination igniting inside me. My fight wasn't simply for myself, it was for truth. As Jessica Stark clutched the envelope, her heart raced with uncertainty. The weight of betrayal loomed heavy in the air. What had once been a haven now felt like a prison. Outside, the city throbbed with life, completely unaware of her turmoil. The clock ticked ominously, each second a reminder of the deadline approaching. Just as she opened her mouth to respond to Elizabeth, a loud knock echoed through the house, jolting her from her thoughts. Who could it be now? "Jessica, I know you're in there." It was Ethan Caldwell, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. His expensive suit looked out of place in her modest neighborhood. "This is ridiculous. Just sign the papers. We can all move on." She watched him through the peephole, her resolve hardening. He eventually placed an envelope in her mailbox, his back turned as he returned to his luxury sedan. Only then did she retrieve it, a final agreement with a handwritten note. Final opportunity. Sign by 9 a.m. Monday. That evening, her daughter's voice crackled through the phone, concern heavy in the air. "Mom, what's going on? You sound different." Jessica hesitated, the truth weighing on her tongue. "I was terminated yesterday." "What? But you're days away from your full retirement fund. They can't do that." "They did," Jessica replied, steadier than she felt. "But don't worry, I'm handling it. Do you need me to come home? I can be on a flight from Denver tomorrow." "No, sweetheart. Stay put. I've got this covered." After hanging up, Jessica sank into the shadows of her living office space, grappling with the gravity of the upcoming SEC meeting. For years, she had played by the rules, believing in her company's integrity. But Virtue Dynamics had made its choice. Now it was her turn to make one. She would not sign their agreement. Each page of her meticulous evidence whispered echoes of betrayal and hope. This battle was far from over. I would not be silenced. I wouldn't let them toss aside 3 decades of my life without a fight. Monday couldn't come soon enough. When that morning finally arrived, clarity washed over me like a refreshing rain. I dressed with purpose, carefully placing my documentation into a secure briefcase. As I drove downtown to the Federal Building, The weight of what I was about to do pressed heavily on my shoulders. Yet, there was a sense of rightness in the air, a feeling that I was finally reclaiming my voice. The SEC offices were understated but imposing, with glass partitions and hushed conversations echoing through the halls. Gregory met me in the lobby, his familiar face showing the passage of time, but still radiating the sharp intelligence I remembered. "Jessica," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "It's good to see you, Gregory," I replied, grateful for his support. "Thank you for taking this seriously." He led me to a conference office space where two other investigators awaited: Angela Brennan, a senior enforcement attorney, and James Weston, a forensic accountant, greeted me with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Stark," Angela began, her tone serious, "before we start, I want to confirm that you understand the process we're initiating today. Once you share this information with us, the investigation becomes official. There's no turning back." I nodded, my heart steady. I understand completely. For the next 3 hours, I walked them through my documentation. I recounted the irregular financial reporting I'd first noticed 4 years ago, when shipments didn't match invoices. I detailed the quality control certifications that had been backdated after products had already shipped. I highlighted the pattern of revenue manipulation that had intensified in recent quarters, particularly after Ethan Caldwell's arrival. James examined the financial documents with growing concern. "These discrepancies aren't small," he noted, his brow furrowing. "The company has been systematically overstating revenues by at least 18% for months." As I spoke, the memories flooded back: the laughter of colleagues, the scent of burnt coffee, the camaraderie that once filled the office. Now, those voices felt like ghosts, haunting my thoughts. I could almost hear the faint clatter of keyboards, the rustle of leaves outside, and the rain tapping against the window, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. What had once been a sanctuary now felt like a battleground. I was fighting not just for myself, but for the truth. The warmth of past friendships had turned cold, leaving only the chill of isolation and the harsh taste of fear that I might lose everything I'd fought so hard to build. But I wouldn't back down. I would stand tall, even in the face of betrayal. This battle was far from over, and I was ready to reclaim my dignity and forge a new path. As Jessica Stark sat in the dimly lit office space, the air buzzed with tension, heavy like a looming storm. The clock ticked, each second hammering in time with her racing heart. It was like every heartbeat echoed in the office space, loud, relentless. Angela Brennan's voice faded into a blur as a chilling realization washed over her. "How long will this take?" Jessica had asked, but the response felt like a cruel joke, a stark reminder of her precarious situation. Then the door creaked open. A shadow filled the doorway. Could it be Ethan Caldwell, the man who had schemed to bring her down? The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, and Jessica's breath hitched. What would happen next? For 2 long years, she had uncovered the dark underbelly of securities fraud at Virtue Dynamics. "Angela," she had reiterated, "I documented every concern: the botched shipment invoices, the back-dated certifications." Each revelation felt like peeling back layers of deception, exposing the rot beneath. But when Ethan joined 6 months ago, her reports started disappearing, sidestepped like they were mere whispers in the wind. With determination, she stared down Gregory, the lead investigator. "You believe my termination ties directly to these reports?" she challenged, her voice steady. "Yes," he replied, leaning closer. "The timing, 3 days before your retirement fund vests, is too convenient." The implications hung thick in the air. She had recently flagged major issues with Ethan's aggressive cost-cutting initiative. It was clear he needed to erase her before she escalated any further. As their meeting wrapped up, Angela detailed next steps, But Jessica's mind raced. How long would this drag on? It varies, Angela said, but with what you've shown us, we may move quickly. But before Jessica could even step back into her life, her phone rang. It was Janet from HR, her voice shaking. Melody, something's happening. The board just called an emergency meeting. Rumors about SEC investigators contacting our legal team are swirling. So, it had begun, faster than she had anticipated. Did you report something? Janet asked hesitantly. I did what I should have done years ago, Jessica replied, resolute. But what about my retirement fund paperwork? That's why I'm calling, Janet said. They've put everything on hold. Just then, her phone buzzed again, shattering the already fraught atmosphere. The office space was a pressure cooker, shadows flickering like whispers around Jessica Stark as she sat on the edge of her chair. The phone buzzed incessantly, each vibration matching the thundering rhythm of her heartbeat. Outside, rain whispered against the window, a soothing contrast to the chaos swirling inside her. She glanced at her own reflection on the darkened screen. Was this fight worth the cost? The haunting question echoed in her mind, thick with uncertainty, demanding answers. Jessica? The voice on the other line turned her blood cold. It was Ethan Caldwell, the very mastermind behind her unraveling. We need to talk. Can you come in tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'm busy. Her voice was steady, but inside the storm raged. She had been gathering evidence, unearthing the rot of fraud at Virtue Dynamics, and now betrayal loomed larger than life. On the other end, Ethan's voice dripped with a strained formality. We have a matter that requires your expertise. Jessica felt her stomach twist. Only in the presence of my attorney and SEC reps. His silence bore down on her like a weight. Is that understood? Finally, he cleared his throat. Perhaps we can set up a more formal meeting. That was it. No triumph there, just exhaustion gnawing at her spirit. She never wanted to be a whistleblower. All she sought was a fulfilling career that led to a secure retirement. But GRW had pushed her to this brink, and now all would pay the toll. The evening melted into a blur of unanswered calls from frantic colleagues and worried executives, but Jessica didn't pick up. The time for quiet conversations was over. This fight would unfold in the glaring light of truth. By Wednesday morning, the storm of consequences had erupted. Local outlets screamed headlines about the SEC investigation into Virtue Dynamics, plunging the company's stock into turmoil. Analysts who praised Ethan's aggressive cost-cutting just days before were now questioning the integrity of everything they'd built. Then came the letter, a formal withdrawal of her termination, followed by an administrative leave with full benefits pending review. It felt like too little, too late. At 10 a.m., her attorney, Barbara Reynolds, joined the unfolding chaos. The gravity of the situation weighed down heavy in the air. Jessica, we need to discuss our next move, she said, her gaze serious. Right. What can they throw at us now? Jessica asked, bracing for the next wave, her heart pounding. But before Barbara could respond, the phone buzzed again. As Jessica Stark walked into the office space, she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. The tension coiled around her like a vine, thickening the air, stifling her breath. Colleagues huddled nearby, their hushed voices dropping to a whisper as she passed. Faces that were once familiar turned foreign. Their eyes, brimming with pity and trepidation, betrayed the truth. She was the target, and betrayal loomed larger than life. William Hargrove sat at the head of the table, his expression aging faster than the years of hard work behind her. "Thank you for coming, Miss Stark," he began, but Jessica was already lost in thoughts. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows, as if they echoed the uncertainty in her heart. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice steady but her insides roiling. Was this confrontation truly about the fraud she had unearthed at Virtue Dynamics, or something more sinister? Barbara, her attorney, took the lead. Let's be clear, Mr. Hargrove. Jessica didn't raise these concerns post-termination. She documented them for 4 years as her job required. A pause hung in the air, heavy with layers of tension. The board members fidgeted, and William squirmed under Barbara's steady gaze. "We have initiated a comprehensive internal investigation," he stammered, but Jessica could sense the cracks in their facade, the desperation in their voices. Hadn't they attempted to silence her for long enough? Suddenly, clarity shot through her. A fierce determination ignited within. This wasn't just about her job anymore. It was about exposing the rot that ran deep through the corporate veins of Virtue Dynamics. "So, my termination. It's rescinded." She pressed, her heart racing. "Yes, of course, you are, an employee in good standing." William fumbled, trying to regain control, but the change was palpable. Her fierce resolve shifted her from victim to warrior, and yet it felt like too little, too late. She had seen this game before. The meeting dragged on. The board members attempted to distance themselves from the chaos of the past, a smokescreen of false integrity. "We need a full accounting of how her previous concerns were suppressed," Barbara insisted. The stark contrast between their words and actions sent shivers down Jessica's spine. Outside, the scent of rain lingered in the air, a comforting promise of cleansing. As whispers of her past echoed loudly in her mind, the realization sunk in. Some of those she had trusted might have orchestrated her downfall. This moment was a breaking point, the turning of the tide. She would reclaim her narrative, and they would pay for their secrets. The battle was just beginning. As I stood in that dimly lit office space, the stale coffee scent wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. Outside, the city buzzed along, a stark contrast to the thick silence inside. It was all too overwhelming, and memories crashed over me like waves. My first day at Virtue Dynamics, the thrill of starting a new chapter, the laughter shared during lunch breaks. But those familiar faces now twisted into masks of uncertainty and fear. The weight of betrayal bore down on me and tears threatened to spill out. How did it come to this? Each moment dragged on, punctuated by the tension in the air. "What's this about?" My voice, steady on the surface, trembled inside. Was this confrontation truly a showdown over the fraud I had exposed? Or was there a deeper threat lurking in the shadows? Barbara, my attorney, stepped forward with confidence. "Let's be clear, Mr. Caldwell. Jessica didn't raise these concerns post-termination. She documented them for 4 long years." The silence that followed was palpable, filled with unspoken truths. The board members fidgeted, and Caldwell, the lead regulatory advisor, squirmed. "We've initiated a comprehensive internal investigation," he stammered, panic flaring in his eyes. I sensed their desperation and cracked facades. Hadn't they tried to bury me long enough? Clarity surged within me. I wasn't just here to fight for my job anymore. It was time to expose the festering deceit at Virtue Dynamics. "So, my termination, it's rescinded?" I pressed, heart racing with newfound defiance. "Yes, you are an employee in good standing." Caldwell fumbled, desperately trying to regain his footing, but I could feel the shift, the change in the air as my status morphed from victim to fighter. Yet the realization stung. It felt like too little, too late. The meeting dragged on as they attempted to paint over their past with a veneer of false sincerity. Barbara pressed for a thorough accounting of how my concerns had been suppressed. Each word sent shivers down my spine. Their lack of integrity was as clear as day. Outside, the scent of rain kissed the air, a promise of cleansing, while whispers of betrayal echoed in my mind. Some of those I had trusted might have orchestrated my downfall. This was the breaking point, the turning of the tide. I would reclaim my narrative. They would pay for their secrets. The battle had just begun. I watched in silence as the reality of their misconduct unfolded, a mix of shock and disappointment etched on their faces. As we stood, I let Barbara handle the legal maneuvering while I keenly observed their reactions. Faces I had relied on for years now shifted from ignorance to fear, the newfound respect evident in their wide eyes. "Jessica," Caldwell interjected as we prepared to leave, "we hope you'll consider speaking with the SEC investigators about our corrective actions. Your support would be invaluable." I locked eyes with him, my voice cool and unwavering. "Mr. Caldwell, I've dedicated 29 years to this company's compliance. I filed 47 major reports documenting serious irregularities, sent 16 memos about the very issues under investigation, and requested 9 meetings with executive leadership, of which only 2 were granted, and neither resulted in action. Where was your support back then?" The office fell silent, the weight of my words settling heavily. "I'll cooperate fully with the internal investigation and the SEC. But I will only speak to the facts as I always have. Whether those facts bolster or damage virtue dynamics depends on your actions now, not the words you utter in this office space." As Barbara and I stepped into the parking lot, I finally exhaled, a deep breath of relief mingled with exhaustion. The adrenaline that had propelled me through the confrontation ebbed, leaving clarity in its wake. This wasn't victory. Not yet. It was just the beginning of accountability. "What happens now?" I asked Barbara as we stood by our cars. She smiled slightly, the strength in her eyes unwavering. Now they scramble to save what they can while the investigation unfolds. "But make no mistake, Melody, they're terrified of you." I shook my head. "They're not terrified of me. They're terrified of the truth. Truth, there's a difference." Barbara nodded thoughtfully. "There is, indeed, and that difference is why you'll win this regardless of how it plays out." As I drove home, I wondered what Thomas would have thought of all this. My late husband had always encouraged my meticulous nature, even when others found it frustrating. Your attention to detail isn't a quirk. Melody, he'd say, it's a superpower. Perhaps he'd been right all along by Friday, exactly 1 week after my termination. The story had evolved into a full-blown corporate scandal. The SEC had issued formal requests for information from Grant Well, and an internal memo from William Harrove announced Ethan Caldwell's immediate suspension pending investigation. The company's stock had dropped nearly 30%. Triggering concerns from major investors and partners, I was no longer just Jessica Stark, overlooked compliance officer business journals, now referred to me as a whistleblower, and the woman who exposed Granwell. The sudden attention was uncomfortable, but I remained focused on the process, working closely with the SEC investigators, who now had offices set up in a separate building near Grant's headquarters. The evidence ID provided had opened many doors, but the investigation was revealing even more troubling patterns. Gregory called to update me on their progress. "Melody, it's worse than we thought," he said, his voice grave. "The financial manipulation goes back at least 5 years, predating Langston. He accelerated it, but he didn't start it. I suspected as much," I replied. "There were irregularities I couldn't fully document because I couldn't access certain executive-level reports. Well, we can access them now." Gregory continued, "And they tell a story of systematic fraud designed." Jessica Stark sat in her living office space, staring blankly at the news report flickering on the screen. The bright colors danced mockingly, illuminating the faces of those she once called friends. A wave of betrayal crashed over her. How had it come to this? The very people she confided in were now casting her as the villain in their corporate drama. It felt surreal, like a bad movie she couldn't escape. Her heart raced as anger and sorrow intertwined, the bitter taste of betrayal settling in. The company she had devoted her life to had turned against her, and the fight for her dignity was just beginning. Days passed like shadows, and rumors escalated into full-blown scandal. By that Friday, the narrative had twisted gorgeously, capturing the attention of the nation. A formal investigation from the SEC had been launched against Virtue Dynamics. Jessica's life was suddenly a whirlwind of news reporters and corporate lawyers. Gone were the days of anonymity. In their place stood the harsh spotlight of justice. The company's stock had plummeted. She was no longer just a forgotten compliance officer. The media called her a whistleblower, the woman who dared to expose the underbelly of corporate deceit. But just when she thought things had taken a turn in her favor, she got a call from her daughter, Elizabeth. "Mom, have you seen the news?" The tightness in her voice twisted Jessica's stomach. "They're trying to credit you." Jessica hadn't watched. She'd consciously avoided media noise, focusing instead on the unfolding events. "What are they saying?" she asked, curiosity creeping in. "Langston's claiming you had performance issues, that you're just bitter about being overlooked for promotion," Elizabeth spat, her anger palpable through the phone. Jessica felt the sting of his words. It was a classic defense mechanism. Attack the whistleblower's credibility instead of addressing the truth. "It doesn't matter," she reassured her daughter, her voice steady. "The evidence speaks for itself. I've had stellar performance reviews for nearly 30 years. But still, doubt was a powerful beast, clawing into her heart as the media echoed Langston's desperate narrative. She could feel the weight of each article, questioning her motives, twisting her integrity. "Don't respond to any of it," Barbara advised when she called. "Let the SEC handle it." "I'm not going to respond," Jessica assured her, a plan forming in her mind, but she was going to do more than stay silent. The next morning, she would be ready. Jessica Stark drove to her local bank, her heart racing. She needed to speak with Tracy Ferguson, the manager she'd known for years. As she entered the bank, the familiar scent of polished wood and fresh coffee enveloped her. "Jessica," Tracy greeted her warmly. "I've been following the news. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, Tracy," Jessica replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "But I need access to my safe deposit box." Inside the private office space, she opened the box and pulled out a sealed envelope she had tucked away 3 years ago. It felt heavy in her hands, a weight of secrets and truths. Inside were copies of email exchanges between Ethan Caldwell's predecessor and 2 board members. They discussed ways to manage financial appearances during a critical acquisition period. Jessica had stumbled upon these emails while archiving old correspondence. Something had urged her to secure them separately from her other documents. She hadn't included them in her initial SEC report because they didn't directly relate to the current issues. But now, with Ethan trying to undermine her credibility, these emails provided crucial context. They showed that the problematic practices predated her concerns about him. She called Gregory immediately. "I have something you need to see," she said, urgency lacing her words. "It changes the narrative completely." As she drove to meet him, a storm brewed inside her. There was no satisfaction in this moment, only the certainty that the full truth would finally emerge. The emergency board meeting was set for Monday morning, 10 days after her termination and 7 days after the SEC investigation went public. Jessica wasn't invited, but she didn't need to be there to know what was unfolding. The additional documentation she provided had accelerated the investigation dramatically, implicating not just Ethan but multiple board members in a years-long pattern of financial manipulation. Gregory called her from outside the meeting office space. "It's chaos in there," he reported, his voice tense. "The SEC enforcement team just presented their preliminary findings. 3 board members have resigned." Jessica's heart raced. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. But as the rain began to patter against her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Would the truth set her free, or would it lead her deeper into a web of betrayal? The stakes were higher than ever, and the future hung in the balance, poised on a razor's edge. Jessica Stark had worked hard to build her reputation, but now everything was crumbling. By noon, rumors swirled through the air like a summer storm. Everyone knew David was scrambling to make excuses, claiming he was only following established practices. Did anyone really believe him? Then the earth shifted. A press release hit the wires like a thunderclap. Grant Well announced major changes. 4 board members were out, including William Hargrove, and Ethan Caldwell was fired on the spot. The stock price plummeted another 12%. Chaos erupted. As my phone buzzed, I braced myself. It was Janet from HR again. "The interim CEO wants to meet with you tomorrow, if possible." I swallowed hard. The interim CEO was Patricia Donovan, a sharp strategist with an air of determination. She'd always been professional with me, but rarely warm. The meeting happened at my attorney's office. Patricia walked in, looking both exhausted and resolute. "Jessica, we won't waste time. The company is in crisis, and you're right in the middle of it. Not because of any wrongdoing on your part, but because you were the only one consistently doing the right thing." She slid a folder my way. It felt eerily similar to the termination paperwork David had handed me just 11 days prior. "This officially rescinds your termination, retroactively reinstates your employment." The words began to blur together in a haze. The folder included 5 years of salary, lifetime health care, and a formal apology from the board. "We're starting a corporate ethics division," Patricia continued, her eyes sharp, "and we want you to design it as a consultant. Your experience is invaluable." I closed the folder slowly, my mind racing. David and the board members who had betrayed me were still out there, looming like shadows in the back of my mind. Did I really want to step back into this snake pit, or could this path finally lead me to reclaim my life with dignity? The tension between them felt palpable, a standoff waiting to explode. The stakes had never been higher. Would I rise from the ashes of this betrayal, or would I be consumed by the very world I had fought to protect? The courtroom felt like an Arctic chill, thick with unspoken tension. I sat there, heart hammering against my ribs, surrounded by muted whispers. The scent of polished wood mixed with the stale coffee hung heavy in the air, each breath a reminder of betrayal. That's when I saw him, Ethan Caldwell. Once a titan in the corporate world, now just a shell of his former self, he shuffled in, head down. Our eyes met, a flicker of recognition that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a cruel jolt, a reminder of everything I'd lost. I wasn't a victim anymore. I felt it deep within. I was a catalyst for change. The expression hardened. Criminal charges were looming. The company wouldn't be defending them. Justice had finally arrived at Virtue Dynamics. 6 months passed, and I found myself in a federal courtroom, witnessing as Ethan and 2 other former board members entered guilty pleas to securities fraud. The man who had so nonchalantly ended my career stood diminished, his arrogance replaced by a hollow defeat. As he turned to leave, our eyes locked for a heartbeat. He didn't see me. He saw the consequences, a mirror reflecting everything he had done. The GRW scandal had ignited a fire in corporate governance, highlighting how crucial internal compliance really is. I'd turned down that consulting position with the restructured company, choosing instead to collaborate with regulatory agencies on effective whistleblower protocols. My story resonated. It inspired others in compliance to step forward with their own tales of corporate wrongdoing, creating ripples across entire industries. I received a substantial whistleblower payment, 15% of the penalties assessed against Virtue Dynamics. Coupled with my retirement fund and the settlement, I had financial security, something I never thought I'd achieve. I even established a scholarship fund for women pursuing careers in corporate ethics, naming it after a mentor who believed in me. Elizabeth had moved to Philadelphia, wanting to be closer to my new lakeside home where I built memories with my grandchildren, moments I had missed while tethered to my desk. One evening, as we soaked in the sunset's hues over the shimmering water, Elizabeth asked out of the blue, "Mom, do you regret staying at GRW all those years, knowing how it all ended?" I paused, weighing my words. No, I finally said. I regret that it was necessary to expose. That's when I realized. Through the chaos, I had not only salvaged my dignity, but forged a path toward real change. Was it worth the struggle? Absolutely. I emerged stronger, ready to take on whatever came next, standing tall against the shadows of betrayal. As the sun dipped low, casting a warm glow across the sterile office space, Jessica Stark stood alone, papers strewn around her like autumn leaves. The air buzzed with unspoken tension. The echoes of betrayal swirled among the rustling reports, reminders of her battles. She took a deep breath and felt a weight lift. Memories flooded back, lessons learned in her fight, standing firm in her truth. The taste of bittersweet victory lingered. Not revenge, but her integrity, forever etched in her daughter's heart. Was it all worth it? She asked herself. Jessica felt that liberation wash over her as she looked toward a brighter future. Time passed, and Jessica transformed her pain into purpose. She turned down a tempting job offer at Virtue Dynamics, instead collaborating with regulatory agencies to develop essential whistleblower protocols. Her story became a beacon of hope for others. She received a substantial whistleblower payment, and her retirement fund had finally solidified her future, something she once thought unreachable. On a tranquil evening by the lakeside, Elizabeth turned to her mother and asked, "Do you regret staying at GRW all those years, knowing how it all ended?" Jessica paused, weighing her thoughts. "No. I regret that it was necessary to expose." In that moment, Jessica realized the profound impact of her journey. It wasn't about vindication or financial security. It was about showing her daughter what it meant to stand firm in one's values, regardless of the cost. And what of Virtue Dynamics? The company, forever scarred, found new leadership, committed to transparency and compliance. They still sent annual reports, perhaps to remind themselves of their past mistakes, or as a silent apology. Jessica read them with a sense of professional satisfaction, seeing real change take root. May view her story as one of revenge, but not Jessica. I documented the facts, reported the truth, and stood by my findings, she reflected. This time, others were forced to listen, and through it all, she emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever came next. The shadows of betrayal had been transformed into newfound resilience.